Alright, so before we begin, apologies to my wife for showing parts of our bedroom. I really wanted to, show off the pens and stuff like that. I got a few new ones from PAX. Some people have a chain, and I collect pens. So, as I just mentioned, I took my kids to PAX West over Labor Day weekend, and I would definitely say it was a resounding success. They had a great time, and they got to just discover the old school joy of accidentally finding a new video game and having it end up being something that you get completely hyped about, or something that you achingly look forward to. To me, a lot of it is just very much like a rite of passage of finding just some random game in the middle of a hall, walking up saying, "Can I play?" and just having a whole new world. I think being in a very open environment like that was very liberating for them, just because of the fact that they were basically in a place where there was very little risk of failing or not having a good time. You spend a couple minutes with the game, you don't like it, you just move on. So while I was reflecting upon that weekend, I started thinking about other games, or even, kind of like game moments that I would definitely love to share with my kids. And while diving into this thought, I realized that most of these games were not only mature rated games, but it's one of those things, like, in hindsight, maybe it shouldn't be rated mature, or maybe it's something that we should kind of like revisit and discuss. Like, not saying we have to go back and re-rate the game, but I think it's more so with the way that time and technology has progressed, maybe some of these games aren't as mature in their content than we may think. Like, when you think about basically other similarly rated media for children or young people that have similar content to some mature rated video games, I don't know, for me it feels like there's a little bit of an imbalance. So I wanted to kind of get my thoughts, get a couple example games to really try to exemplify what I'm talking about, and get other people's thoughts. It doesn't matter if you are a parent or not. It doesn't matter if you want to have kids in the future or not. I think that this is very much a discussion worth having, because it's media literacy, and that is something that is very important to me. And I think that, as you will see, there's reasons why that this is very important to me. And I think that being able to sit with our kids, or sit with younger generations, and being able to explain this media to them in a very open way is very important, because a lot of these games I played when I wasn't 17. These were during my formative years when I was like in high school and stuff. So it would be very much hypocritical of me to say that F you, I got mine to my kids, that they can't have similar experiences that shape who they will be 10, 20, even 30 years from now. So if you end up leaving a comment, or you end up replying to a comment because of this video, be kind. Remember, we are all just basically under the boot of the elite, and the only real warfare out there is class warfare. So just stay woke. Also, if you have nothing else going on in your life that you feel the need to argue with parental opinions on video games, I don't know what to tell you. Alright, so to make sure that we're all contextually on the same page, I'm gonna try to kind of give you guys an overview of kind of what my kids have already been exposed to in terms of like different media, and I guess the concepts and content of that media. As I said earlier, I think that there's kind of an imbalance in regards to what we consider something that is okay for kids and young adults in regards to books, movies, and TV shows, and video games that have similar concepts and ideas that are rated mature. I think really the easiest way to break this down would be the age-old adage of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I think I can kind of get everything lumped into those three categories so that you all are picking up what I'm putting down. So in an effort to save time, I'm combining sex and violence into one Slaneshi type of lump, because if the reaction to Lady D from RE7 taught us anything, is that for a lot of people, violence can be sexy. Also, book talk. They are some of the few internet subsects on the internet that make me blush with... Ugh. Because of the fact that sex ed in America is woefully inadequate, and because of the fact that YouTubers that are the same age as me are being ousted as creepers, making sure that my kids know what red flags look like and how to look for them has unfortunately kind of become necessary in this day and age. And like, the thing is, they get it, but they don't get it. Anything that is sexual or sensual, they call it sussy. They say, oh, is that sussy? It's basically saying, I have pop in the attic. They understand that sensuality and sexuality can be used as a form of self-expression, but with them being children, they are not anywhere near old enough to be either on the giving or the receiving end of that type of intention. And in terms of like media that, you know, make those types of references, they've watched cartoons from the 90s. They've watched stuff that I watched growing up. You know, they've watched Rocko's Modern Life. A lot of the jokes went over their head, but I was their age when I was watching shows like that. They've seen stuff from the 80s and 90s, and so many people, you know, so many of these like pearl clutchers will say that, oh, you can't do, you know, stuff like that for anymore on TV. And while they may be right for some parts of it, especially in regards to treatment of LGBTQ, people of color, other minorities, stuff like that, yeah, a lot of it was pretty awful. But at the same time, my wife and I make sure that we continuously explain the contextual difference of things like real and fictional violence, and, you know, when violence might be right or wrong given a situation. They like to indulge and participate in things like Warhammer and Star Wars and other types of media that kind of sugarcoat the atrocities of war and fascism, you know, kind of makes it sexier or whatever. They've done all that. So for me to say that because a video game does it in a different way, why? Oh, and they watch anime. I mean, do I really need to say more? They watch anime, they watch cartoons, and even in both of us starting One Piece, anime and live action versions, they've seen a handful of things that would be considered PG-13 in a movie, but are more closer rated to like mature. Like in the first episode of One Piece, the dude gets cut in half, the Mr. 7 or whatever. But that would be an instant M rating for a game. Like something Metal Gear Rising. In regards to drugs, we live in a legal state. We live in Washington State. We explain to our kids how moderation works. And we explain the differences between quote-unquote natural drugs like caffeine, wacky tobacco, and Super Mario mushrooms, and the harder stuff, usually more synthetic stuff like Walter White and Whitney Houston. When they ask about stuff like alcohol and its normalized status in our society today and its effects, we're honest at least about our stance on the matter. I hope that when they are old enough to want to start experimenting with this stuff, like I'm assuming high school age, that they will be comfortable at the very least talking to my wife and I beforehand, so we can make sure they aren't doing anything that could have them end up, you know, ODing in the middle of a friend's car or experiencing a really bad trip. Always test your products, folks, and carry Narcan if you're gonna do that. Based on my personal history with dabbling in these things growing up, I mean, this is pretty much how I break it down. Cannabis is okay, alcohol runs rampant in our family, and if you're ever going to experiment with mind-expanding experiences, that should be done with a sober sitter that you literally trust with your life. Alright, and for the last of the trifecta, the Holy Trinity, whatever you want to call it, let's talk about rock and roll. So I'm using rock and roll as a label for bad language, both in like words and context. My kids listen to their parents, they listen to rappers, and they've listened to Taylor Swift curse. So for me, that it, like, it, while I don't really like my kids cussing at all, just because they're too young for it, it's lowest on my priority list of things to punish them over. They really enjoyed hearing actual plays of things like Critical Role, The Adventure Zone, and Dimension 20, and those 3 actual plays are pretty liberal in their use of language. And I mean, especially when I was younger, when I was getting closer to the age of my eldest child, I was introduced to people like George Carlin and Kevin Smith. And I mean, those are 2 people who really shaped and formed the way that I view the world and I view art and like all these other things. To me, George Carlin and Kevin Smith are both people that have a very eloquent use of the human language and putting words together and doing wordplay and stuff like that. But they also know how to sprinkle it in with cuss words to kind of pepper it a bit. Anyways, while I don't like how my kids will try to slip in cuss words, especially when they're amongst each other or, you know, things of that nature, it'd be hypocritical of me to punish them anytime they let out a damn or what the hell, anything like that. Besides, they've seen most of the Marvel movies. Even Avengers get like 1 shit per movie, so yeah, they try to test their limits, but at the end of the day, they still end up censoring themselves anyway, so I just try not to get too bent up. I try not to get too worked up about it. Alright, so now that we got that all out of the way, let's go over the, I guess the judging criteria that I used for this, because basically anything pre-PlayStation 2 era, right out. Too many, or I guess too few pixels, I would consider PS2. I would probably like throw out the whole PS2 era if it wasn't for the fact that GTA 3 single-handedly caused a second video game moral panic 7 years, 2001, after the ESRB, which was established in '94, was created due to boomer parents crying about Mortal Kombat. Also, a lot of those games have just aged so poorly that making my kids play something like the OG tank controls of Resident Evil, like the first one, that seems like that would be more abusive than having them play RE4 Remake. I'm not gonna lie there. Like, not to go on a tangent, but I don't understand how some parents are like, no, you have to play each generation. You have to, you know, basically don't gatekeep your kids. Let them play whatever they want. Don't force them to do it a certain way. Also, non-ironically, I'm not going to be including any horror games because I'm not really subjecting my kids to that. My kids get their horror fix through, like, some of the jump scare games that they have on Roblox. And honestly, I'm kind of mixed about it, but not that much, because I want my kids, me being a big fan of horror, I want my kids to have that appreciation of horror as a genre and as a medium. And honestly, I think the only way that they can really do that from a young age and still not grow up to be too messed up is through some of the mascot horror stuff like Piggy or whatever. It's a very interesting topic that, yeah, I will probably dive into later. The main spoiler of this video is that the biggest differentiator for me is suspension of disbelief via obviously fantastical worlds. Placing your violent world in a very obvious sci-fi or fantasy setting is going to be easier for all parties involved, especially if they're trying to separate themselves from whatever may be going on within the game and what's going on outside the game in terms of like a meta narrative or things like that. I think a pretty easy example of something like this is I wouldn't let my kids play something like Call of Duty, which is, a lack of a better term, minus Nicki Minaj and stuff. It's a realistic military shooter. A lot of that stuff is a lot more grounded in some of the brutalities of war, let's be honest. But something like BattleBit Reloaded, that's going to get an okay from me because of the fact that while it's very mechanically similar to older Call of Duties or older Battlefields, it's blocky, so it's easier to have that level of suspension of disbelief. Also, my kids aren't really ready for like body horror, like Dead Space or stuff like that. So while I'm like a big Junji Ito fan, I'm not gonna make my kids do that. At least not now. I'll wait until they're high school. So I'm gonna be kind of clumping things together. I'm gonna be grouping like series. I'm gonna be grouping stuff together, and it will make sense. So trust me, and let's go along for this ride, because I am just now realizing the endeavor I have put myself into with this video. Also, at any point in this video, if you think that I am a terrible parent, be sure to leave a comment. If you think that I am a bad dad, make sure to leave a like. If you think that I am a rad dad, make sure to subscribe. And if you would think that I'm a bad rad dad, mad lad, then I guess share this video. Alright, so right off the bat, I'm going to get my little topical reference for this video out of the way, and I'm going to say Bethesda games. More specifically, Skyrim and Starfield. So, Bethesda is known for being one of the most successful game developers in the world. They are known for creating immersive and open-world games that allow players to explore, create, and customize their own experiences. They helped create the mainstream concept of non-linear gameplay, where players can choose their own path and goals in a vast and dynamic world. They weren't the first to do it, but they were the ones to really make it mainstream. This gives players more freedom and agency and makes each playthrough unique and memorable. Their three tentpole experiences, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and now Starfield, gives nerds of the three main genres pretty varied adventures while still following a very similar formula. It's very similar to trying Internet McDonald's. Different, yet familiar. Bethesda games are rated M for basically the aforementioned sex, drugs, and rock and roll that I just mentioned earlier. But if we're talking about vanilla, unmodded Bethesda RPGs, the sexual scenes are all just fade to black. The violence at worst involves decapitation. But after my kids saw the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy, I couldn't really unring that bell. In Elder Scrolls, you go around using magic and medieval weaponry to slay your foes and followers. Medieval might and magic are something that my kids will never come into contact with, so I have no issue with them living the power fantasy of being the Dragonborn and smashing the skull of a dragon with a Daedric mace, and a follower sworn to carry their burdens. It's classic D&D fantasy trope stuff. And before I start hearing about the lusty Argonian maid, I don't think that enough kids, to be quite frank, are going to care enough about all those individual books in Elder Scrolls to find that. And if they did, they're not going to get it. There are far more graphic things and worse things that happen in the Bible that I'm not going to be worried about a pair of snitties in a book where they don't even show them. It's on the bottom of my list. The opposite side of the same pendulum, Starfield. I'm a handful of hours in, and I mean, I'm just kind of messing around with side quests and stuff like that. But yeah, from my current judgment so far, there's no nudity in this mature rated game. It does the standard fade to black type of stuff. Whatever. My kids have played The Sims. They know what woohoo means. I can't unring this bell. The suggestive scenes are mostly dialogue based, and I mean, once again, the act takes place off screen. In regards to references, the most that you see are very cliche things like, oh, talk about seeing stars, woo, that was amazing. And I'm all for getting a little wild, but next time let's try it without the jetpacks. And I mean, there's drinking and drug use, alcohol, once again, so normalized, it's just not even considered whatever. And they have Aurora, which is not dissimilar from like Jet and Mentats and all that stuff. It's all par for the Bethesda course. But I will say what I am loving about Starfield so far is the sense of wonder and exploration that the game, at least initially, provides and is. But the one thing that I am really loving about this game is the sense of wonder and exploration that it inherently projects. The Constellation Group is all about the excitement of venturing into the unknown and seeing how we're more likely to get. The Constellation Group is really almost kind of inspiring in the fact that they are all about the initial excitement about exploring into space and growing humanity. And while we're more likely to head towards Fallout 4 than we are to head towards Starfield, it's really nice to play a game that has humanity being mostly good and still has a level of like optimism and working together and all that stuff. And basically we didn't end up only on planet Earth. Also, in a weird ironic twist, Starfield's NASA punk aesthetic means that it's so grounded in reality so far that, I mean, I haven't seen anything that wouldn't be considered gross or body horror-y. And man, that aesthetic is just so good. Also, actually, in regards to Fallout itself, Fallout for me is a hard maybe. The level of disconnect and suspension is closer to 0 than the other two series. Stuff like super mutants, laser weapons, and Mr. Fistos help remind you that it's a fictional setting, but that doesn't change the impact of seeing the bloody mess perk in action and, you know, the piles of guts and viscera that you see during your adventures. I think that might be a bit too much for my kids. I know Skyrim is basically the same in many ways, but in that game, I'd say you are dealing with just as many, if not more, fantastical creatures and races than your regular-ass human. I'd feel more comfortable introducing my kids to Fallout when they're in their cynical, edgelord high school phases, where they start understanding the satire of the series, but they can still have fun running around just causing random havoc. Also, in terms of a political message and ideas, Metal Gear Solid series does a much better and stronger presentation on the effects of nuclear armament and war. So yeah, if I had to pick like one Bethesda game that I would let my kids play right now, it'd probably be Skyrim. It's just such a pure fantasy setting. It's very much a stereotypical D&D setting that it is so much easier to kind of disconnect your action from the world that it's all taking place in, using magic to set people on fire and stuff like that. It's just a lot easier to not take it seriously and not think about, oh, what kind of impact is this causing to my child? But speaking of impact on children, I know everyone's like, oh yeah, kids today wouldn't survive Xbox Live lobbies of yesteryear. So let's talk about Halo and Gears of War. The original Halo and Gears of War trilogy are on my bucket list of games to complete with my kids before I die. Included in this list is a complete tabletop RPG campaign, an MMO raid, and my kids actually playing the quiet game. But I digress. Both of these games are fundamental changes to the way that third and first person shooters look and feel to this very day. Halo revolutionized the first-person shooter genre. That's not even up for debate. By introducing features that are now standard in many games, like regenerating health and dual-wielding weapons, vehicle combat, and melee attacks just to name a few, it also laid the foundation for the standard console FPS control scheme, which was designed to make the game accessible and intuitive for console players. While the dual analog control scheme may seem very obvious today, it was not the standard at the time. Most console shooters before Halo 1 only used one analog stick for both aiming and movement, which made it really difficult to strafe and aim at the same time. Halo 1 changed that by assigning one stick to movement and the other to aiming, giving the player more control and freedom over their act. This also allowed for more precise aiming, as the player could adjust their sensitivity and invert their access according to their preferences. And you have to remember, this is all the way back in 2001. That would make me about 11 at the time. My oldest kid's turning 10, so both you and I really need to kind of keep that in mind going forward. Not just for this video, but also, you know, our actual lives, at least for me. Speaking of multiple kids, multiplayer has long been at the heart of the shooter genre. For many players, even the grandiose and elaborate story of the Halo franchise is mostly a backdrop for essentially a long tutorial before they jump into the multiplayer. To some people, co-op Halo is the only way that they will play the campaign, which I actually find very beautiful and wholesome. Something I've talked about on my channel recently was how local co-op has taken a back seat in recent years, but I guess it's at least something that all 4 of my kids should be able to play Halo 2 against each other when they're older, assuming the game is still going to be playable by that point. Also, shout out to Devolver Digital for giving out free copies of Wizard with a Gun to my kids while we were at PAX West. This isn't an ad of any kind, I'm just really excited to have some couch multiplayer games with them. So the original Gears of War 1 came out in 2006, and it was equally as innovative, but for similarly different reasons. It was praised for its innovative gameplay, stunning visuals, and engaging story, which followed a squad of soldiers fighting against a monstrous alien horde called the Locust. The game's most distinctive feature was its cover system, which allowed players to use the environment as protection from enemy fire. Players could also perform active reloads, which rewarded them with faster and more powerful shots if they timed their button presses correctly. The game also featured a variety of weapons, such as the iconic Lancer, a chainsaw-equipped assault rifle that could be used to slice enemies in half. Part of the reason that I would like my kids to experience this is because it popularized the cover-based shooter genre, which was adopted into games like Uncharted, Mass Effect, and The Last of Us. It would also influence the graphics and sound design of many games as developers tried to emulate its gothic, grim-dark aesthetic and a mix of in-game and pre-made cinematics. I never really realized it until now, but Gears of War is basically just kind of like an alternate universe Space Marine story. And if we're gonna let our kids play Warhammer, then giant Roblox looking dude bros with chain guns, revolvers, and grenades that are fighting an alien scourge on a human colonized planet that isn't Earth is going to be fair game across the board. If anyone really complains, I'll make my kids turn on the confetti mode for Halo, and then I will grab a set of sticks so I can play with them. Did you know that there's a whole subsect of YouTube videos that are dedicated to young children beating Soulsborne games? It's wholesome. It is wholesome AF. Go look it up after this video. But on that note, my 8-year-old son actually asked for a copy of Dark Souls to play on Xbox. The Prepare to Die edition was on sale, so he decided to give it a try. He doesn't play it a lot. He likes me to sit down with him to provide advice and moral support, but he loves the idea of beating a game that is like very infamous for being quote-unquote unbeatable. And what kind of father and parent would I be to deny him the proactiveness and agency of throwing yourself headfirst into an experience that has literally been life-changing for some people? Couple that with my opinion that the Soulsborns are fantastic for learning how to trigger your own personal flow states, pachow. And yeah, this would be an M-rated game I am okay with my kids playing. One of the most distinctive features of Dark Souls is its notorious difficulty. The game doesn't hold your hand or guide you through its world. Instead, it just throws you into a hostile environment full of deadly enemies, traps, and secrets. You will die a lot, but you will also learn from your mistakes and improve your skills. There is no easy mode, there's no difficulty slider to adjust to your challenge. You have to face it head on and overcome it. Take all of that and combine it with the peak culminative Soulsborne gameplay that is Elden Ring, and you basically have your own version of a made-for-TV movie where a parent and child bond over a mutual love of a hobby where the kid ends up being a prodigy and the parents learn how to coach and celebrate their child while also making sure to not try and push them in a narcissistic attempt to relieve their old glory days as a way to vicariously live through said child. Alright, so next up we have Nintendo darling and Nintendo mommy Bayonetta. The Bayonetta video game series is a very popular action-adventure franchise that features a stylish and powerful witch protagonist who battles angels and demons with her guns, her magic, and her hair. The series is known for its fast gameplay, over-the-top action, and very tongue-in-cheek humor. One of the things that I think is central to the Bayonetta series is the empowerment of women. Bayonetta is a strong, confident, and independent woman who does not need no man to save her or tell her what to do. She has agency over her own destiny and her own body, and she is not ashamed or afraid of her femininity, but rather embraces it and celebrates it. I think she should be considered a legitimate role model for people of all ages that consider themselves feminist. One of the most obvious and controversial themes of the Bayonetta series is her sexiness or her sexuality. Bayonetta, our titular heroine, is a witch who uses her hair as her clothes and weapons. From there, she can transform into various animals, summon demons with her hair, and perform powerful attacks called torture attacks and climax attacks that involve sensual poses and suggestive imagery. Mix that with a flirtatious personality and a confident attitude, and you have someone who uses their sexuality as a weapon and not as a weakness. Talk about bombshell, am I right? Yeah! Bayonetta's outfit is not only made out of hair, but it also consists of various accessories that enhance her style and her abilities. Her glasses allow her to see through magical bearings, her earrings allow her to store magical power, and her bracelets protect her from magical damage. And most notably, and her absolute signature, would be her sets of guns that are attached to her hands and feet. Some critics have accused the series of being sexist and objectifying Bayonetta as a stereotype of male gaze. However, if you spend any time with her games, it's pretty obvious that Bayonetta is neither passive or submissive in her character. Kamiya himself, the creator of the series, has stated that he wanted to create a character who is sexy but not vulgar, who could appeal to both men and women. He also said he wanted to help challenge the stereotype of female characters being weak or helpless in video games. Bayonetta's sexiness is not only a visual element but a thematic one. It reflects her identity as a witch, a figure who has been historically associated with sexuality, magic, and rebellion. It also reflects her role as a chaotic neutral wildcard who disrupts the order imposed by the Lumen Sages, a rival clan of light-wielding warriors who seek to control the balance of the universe. The way she uses her body through movement and dress is an extension of her self-expression. Bayonetta's love of clothing isn't only presented as a fashionable and sophisticated woman who enjoys shopping, it also reflects her history as a member of an ancient clan of witches known as the Umbra Witches, who valued beauty and elegance as much as power and knowledge. Another theme I think is important in the Bayonetta series is how love is the balance between light and dark. The game shows that neither side is inherently superior or inferior, but rather that both are necessary and complementary. Bayonetta herself is a product of both light and dark, as she is a child of a Lumen Sage and an Umbra Witch. As I mentioned, they are two opposing clans that, fight to maintain balance of the world. In her game, she fights against both demons and angels who are not always what they seem, and she learns to accept and integrate both aspects of her heritage and to use them for her own benefit. Despite her fierce and independent personality, Bayonetta is neither cold nor heartless. She cares deeply for her friends and allies, especially for Cereza, her younger self who was lost in time. She also develops a romantic interest in Luca, a journalist who follows her around and helps her out. And one thing that I would also like to highlight is that throughout the series, it's mainly Luca chasing Bayonetta around. At no point is she really chasing him, unless maybe in the newest game. I haven't played the newest game yet. But up until that point, Bayonetta shows that love is not a weakness but a strength. It gives her motivation, courage, and joy. It also allows her to unleash her true potential as she can access her most powerful form when she is in sync with someone that she loves. Speaking of badass fighters that leave their dark past behind and end up adopting children and becoming better for it, let's talk about the Yakuza series. Did that transition work? The Yakuza video game series, also known as Like a Dragon in Japan, is a very popular franchise by Sega that combines elements of action-adventure, beat-em-up, role-playing, and open-world genres. The series has been praised for its engaging storylines, rich characters, immersive settings, and insanely diverse gameplay. But I think that some of the themes that are expressed through Kiryu's journey and him going, back and forth between in and out of the Yakuza and the Tojo clan, I think it's definitely something that is worth exploring even at a younger age. One of the most prominent themes of the Yakuza series is the conflict between loyalty and freedom. The main protagonist of most of the games is Kazuma Kiryu. He's a former member of the Tojo clan, a very powerful Yakuza org based in Tokyo. Kiryu, much too old for this shit. He just constantly keeps getting dragged back into the Yakuza world due to his loyalty to his friends and mentors and allies who need his help to deal with various threats and conspiracies. However, Kiryu also yearns for a normal life outside of the Yakuza, especially after he adopts an orphan girl named Haruka. Kiryu's struggle to balance his obligations to his old clan, his desire to protect his new adopted child, and start just a regular life is one of the biggest things about the series and really what's so compelling about it as a whole. In regards to the game's infamous and bombastic combat, the player uses the environment to their advantage, such as smashing objects or throwing enemies into windows or walls. The player can also trigger heat actions, which are powerful and cinematic attacks that deal massive damage to your enemies. The animations are just a beautiful mix of ultra-violence and cartoon violence, and it's absolutely fantastic. I would almost compare it to Japanese wrestling, which has a lot of very similar vibes to it. It's just so over the top, you can't really take it seriously aside from like the brutality of it. It's itchy and scratchy. It's itchy and scratchy. Like, that's really the best way to sum it up. It's just itchy and scratchy violence. Each game does a really good job of taking a snapshot of the different parts of Japan during the different decades the games take place in. From the 80s, when Japan experienced explosive economic growth, to modern day, where the Yakuza are running more of a modern crime setup, utilizing cybercrimes and trafficking. It's really interesting to see, how Japan's history and a lot of like major events in Japan's political history are captured through this game. I really love learning about history through video games. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the infamous minigames of the series itself. To some Yakuza fans, the minigames are the real games. You've got your basics like golf, batting cages, and darts, all the way to the GOATs that are Pocket Circuit, Karaoke, and Cabaret Club. Also, on a final note, Kiryu is based as hell. This man has been roped into like one wacky sex escapade short of 70. Nice. If anyone could be so understanding to the fluidity of sex, love, and gender, it would be this man. Seriously though, like, Kiryu's an ally. The dude's pretty much a straight up ally. He may not be like a proactive ally, but he will definitely step in there and be like, hey man, you need to cut this crap out. And then it'll take you and smash you into a vending machine, and then like your teeth will fall out from the change machine or something like that. But yeah, really to sum it up with the Yakuza series, I mean, violence is cartoonish. My kids aren't gonna read all that text, and they're just gonna hyper focus on like the slot car racing and the karaoke, which is fine because that's what I end up doing too, especially Pocket Circuit. Man. Alright, so before we go into our final game of this video, first off, if you want me to do my part 2, because I ended up taking out, like, this list would have been twice as long. I had a shit ton of other games I wanted to talk about. So if you want to see that, do the YouTubey doobly doo things and give the algorithm encouragement. And yeah, it's also just kind of your daily reminder that Hideo Kojima is right. Hideo Kojima will always be right, and basically we need to just kind of follow whatever he says. So with all that being said, let's finish up and talk about the Metal Gear Solid franchise. So the Metal Gear Solid series is a video game franchise that has captivated millions of players with its engaging gameplay, immersive storytelling, and profound themes. The series is not only a thrilling action-adventure, but also a philosophical exploration of various topics related to war, politics, philosophy, and human nature. Each game in the series has a main theme that drives the plot and the characters' motivations, and also reflects the social and cultural issues of its time. Metal Gear Solid is one of those series that will always prove that art and politics will always be connected, no matter how bad boring chuds wish it wouldn't. Off the top of my head, just right off the top of my head, I can think of 5 topics that MGS explores to a not insignificant depth. We have the rise of private military contractors that hold allegiance only to those who are paying them at that time. The effect that AI will have on an American public who can't tell the difference between something real and something fabricated. Neoliberalism, child soldiers, and finally, the goddamn proxy wars fought with global superpowers by riling up, arming, and training pockets of rebels and fascists in order to take over a region once all the dirty work has been done. Doesn't even go into how memes are literally the DNA of the soul. I'm already going off on a tangent here, but I mean, like, the whole idea of a meme is basically pockets of ideas that are spread through different cultures, both big and small. The memes you ingest help form the person that you are. And I mean, a lot of that was proven in the 2016 election. So yeah, Kojima's right. Like, he called it. One of the most prominent themes in the Metal Gear Solid series is identity. The game often deals with questions like, who are you? What defines you? What is your purpose? The protagonist, Solid Snake, is a clone of a legendary soldier, Big Boss, who has to face his own genetic legacy and his role as a weapon of war. During Snake's adventures, he encounters other clones of Big Boss, such as Liquid Snake and Solid Snake, who have different views on their origins and their goals. The main MacGuffin of the series is the eponymous Metal Gear, a bipedal nuclear weapon that can launch a missile from any terrain. The Metal Gear itself represents the ultimate threat of nuclear war and the military-industrial complex that fuels it. Throughout the series, the protagonist Solid Snake and his allies must stop various factions from using the Metal Gear to achieve their goals, whether it's world domination, revolution, or revenge. The Metal Gear itself is used as an instigator of this change and new identities based on who controls it. The series also explores how one identity can be manipulated by external forces such as governments, organizations, or ideologies. Basically memes. In Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, Raiden discovers that his entire mission was a simulation orchestrated by the Patriots, a secret group that controls the world's information and society. And these people end up being a group of AIs. And these AIs essentially function as a ever-present Illuminati. To this day, the ending speeches of Metal Gear Solid 2 continue to be some of the most relevant and prophetic things ever. But aside from the darkness and seriousness of the story and the settings of the Metal Gear Solid series, everything else is just pure anime nonsense. Hiding in boxes, tricking people with spicy magazines, attaching random soldiers to air balloons only to force them to live a life where you are constantly judo flipping them into the ocean, hiding in lockers with spicy mags, and fart jokes. In terms of visual storytelling, I am a big Kojima stan in his regards to add more film aspects to video gaming. The microwave scene from the end of Metal Gear Solid 4, my personal favorite Metal Gear Solid, had 17-year-old me shedding tears for Old Man Snake. I mean, he's going down that hallway while the only people who ever, truly knew him to any capacity were slowly but surely being, mowed down. It was absolutely harrowing. And then the final battle between him and Ocelot, oh man, my heart. I just, watching grumpy old men, but anime, my god. I legitimately think that the quickest way to radicalize someone, turn them into a Hasanabe head, have them play through the Metal Gear Solid series and also read up on what was going on in world politics, especially US politics at the same time. It's not cool how much of it lines up even with the fictional setting. It's crazy. And the worst part about all this is people kept making jokes about, oh, Metal Gear Solid's plot is just, it makes no sense. And the further and further that we become a not cool cyberpunk dystopian hellhole, the more and more it makes sense. Why? I was hoping for a cyberpunk dystopia where everyone was all cool and sexy and we'd have new alcohol and drugs and stuff. But no, instead we get, English being made as a virus to kill other people in, foreign nations, which is already in itself a very profound statement. Goddamn. Really at this point, I'm pretty much just waiting for our first Death Stranding event, and then that way I can start collecting and hoarding all the little tardigrades that people have to eat. So, yeah, that's where we are. Kojima was always right, so I'm just waiting on it. So, in conclusion, introducing mature content and concepts to children is not something that should be avoided or feared. It's a necessary one that provides a perfect opportunity to foster critical thinking, empathy, and curiosity in younger minds. If I had to provide any unlicensed or unsolicited advice, I think it would have to be that using language and examples that are appropriate for your kids' age group is probably going to be the best way to introduce high-level ideas. And when trying to do that high-level overview, just use plain and clear words that they can comprehend. Don't use jargon, euphemisms, or dog whistles. No messed up coded language, nothing like that. Use examples that are pertinent to their life, or that at least make the most sense in regards to making that connection. So, not just video games, but manga, TV, anime, other books. There are books out there too. Books exist. And the last thing, don't gatekeep. It's the absolute dumbest thing ever. I mean, if you really want to ensure that your kids will never have any interest in your hobbies and will never want to spend any hobby time with you, and then you end up growing old and resenting them for it when it realized that the whole thing was basically just cats in the cradle with a silver spoon, then yeah, gatekeep. But other than that, no, just be better, do better. If your kid is showing an interest in something that you care about, but they're not doing it the right way, guess what? That's a new opportunity for you to learn something new about your own hobby. So, at the end of the day, let them fanfic it out. There's probably already a story where Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader team up to kill, evil Yoda. And I already know that there is a story that involves evil Yoda, because that is called Star Wars Dark Rendezvous. So, really, what is canon? No one likes those gatekeeping nerds, and being one of those gatekeeping nerds to your own kids is just like chud behavior. Don't be a chud. No one likes a chud. Like that's completely selfish, because what you're doing in all of that is you are stifling the growth, the creativity, and the learning of not only your child, but that fandom or whatever that you were so desperate to get them into. You're limiting the growth of whatever, I guess, IP you felt the need to make your personality around. I really wasn't trying to end on like a downer note. I just really can't emphasize how much I hate this behavior and how much that I am ready for it to go away. So if you made it this far, you're probably pretty chill, and I thank you for that. Alright, I've been going on for way too long, so I'm going to make this outro quick. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, like, share, subscribe, leave your comments, let me know what you think. I really would honestly like to get some dialogue going on this. I really want to know people's opinions, and yeah, if you guys have a debate, make it a good one, be nice, don't be mean, and at the end of the day, it's more engagement for me, so I'm not gonna say no. I don't know what I'm gonna do next, so I'll just leave y'all to it. Alright, thank you. Bye!